Um, and then again, financial services, people that are in the mortgage industry, remember 2007, 2008, had a pretty successful software company. And then all of a sudden the floor dropped out on, we call it the financial crisis, but in the mortgage
Right.
industry, we called it the mortgage meltdown. All my clients went out of business overnight. We, had to lay everybody off. We went down to nothing. So I'm a person of faith. It got so bad. I literally, at one moment, I was in the office all by myself. There's nobody left. I just kind of went down to the knees and said, "Hey, like, God, this one's you." And so, believe it or not, a couple weeks after that, I got a contract for 20,000 a month, which is crazy, a consulting contract, and just pulled us out. And from
Wow.
there, yeah, it's been a great life since there. We rebuilt.
Driven by purpose, fueled by passion. My words got power, my thoughts have action. Motivation, stay gracious. That's greatness. Be audacious. Motivation. Be audacious. Innovation. Be audacious. Inspiration. Be bold. Motivation. Be audacious.
Greetings and salutations. Welcome back to another special edition of the Audacious Living Podcast, coming to you this time straight from Puerto Morelos, Mexico. I'm totally thrilled to be here soaking in the coastal vibes and bringing a little bit of that warm Caribbean breeze to our conversation. I truly appreciate you spending time out of your day with us, as always, because our mission is simple. It's to help you live your best audacious life ever. Now, today we're framing our episode with a simple analogy. Life is a mountain trail. Each of us has a unique path, but the principles for climbing it, embracing your circumstances, staying curious, leading with empathy, taking risks, and confidently navigating transitions, they are universal. So, we've got a really special guest here to help us dig deeper into this. I'm excited to introduce Bill Rice. He's a seasoned entrepreneur, a marketing expert with over 20 years of experience. Bill started his journey in the Air Force, working in counterintelligence before transitioning into the business world. Now he helps companies build high-performing lead generation and marketing systems through his work at Bill Rice Strategy Group. His mission is simple. It's to help leaders think strategically, act courageously, and build systems that thrive even in uncertain times. And that's exactly why he's the perfect guest for today's conversation. So without any further ado, let's dive into our chat with Bill. Hey, Bill, thank you for joining me here today on the Audacious Living Podcast. I appreciate you for taking the time to be here, my friend.
Oh, I love the opportunity. Looking forward to talking to your audience, and I love this topic. So.
Yeah, I do as well. It's a favorite of mine. I mean, 500 plus episodes. If I haven't figured out what my favorite is yet, I mean, that's the evidence right there. But it is just really an opportunity to engage in dialogues and conversations. And we really are about encouraging individuals to live their best audacious life. And one of the things that we continually stress, and I probably mentioned over and over again, is provide this analogy to kind of help frame in people's minds about the journey that we're all on. We're all on our own individual pathway, our own individual journey. The most important thing to understand is each pathway is going to be littered with whatever obstacles, roadblocks, scars, whatever you name it, it's there. We know that it's there, but we still have to continue on and traverse through that journey. The big key to understanding is, whatever appears on my path may be similar to someone else, but might be different. And so we're not on the same journey, if you will. However, the skills that we need and the ability to step into these things and be audacious and have courage and be bold, these things are universally applicable to all of us. And so that's what we encourage here. You've got your own foray into the field of audaciousness. So maybe what we'll do as a starting point is give you an opportunity to introduce yourself to our audience, talk about the work that you've done, and then what's got you to the point that you're at now.
Yeah, no, I love the whole concept of audacious living and kind of the journey, and mine has been all of that. If you were to kind of take a look at my LinkedIn profile, I always say that the only thing you'd probably conclude is that either I'm incredibly curious or have a tendency to get bored very quickly. And so I started my journey in the Air Force. Went to the Air Force Academy, went into the Air Force as an officer. The only plan I ever had in my life was to to fly jets since I was a little kid. Did that for a brief moment, and didn't get all the way through the pilot training program. And so in Air Force or any military service, they kind of got your hooks into you for X amount of time. And so if your job goes away, you're not qualified for what you kind of signed up with, you got to figure it out. You got to go find another job. And so from there, I went to the personnel office. They gave me a whole bunch of different things to look through. I was like, oh, okay, I'm pretty ambitious. I thought I was going to be a combat controller. They didn't have any slots available for that. And then there was this kind of little organization called Air Force Office of Special Investigations. I'm like, okay, that sounds cool. And then tucked within that organization, there was a more sort of specialized component of it, which was counterintelligence operations. So I finished the balance of my career, um, in the Air Force in counterintelligence operations, which was super cool to me. We were in an interesting moment. Internet was starting to come online. Everything that we did in intel, we were noticing that the bad guy, so to speak, was migrating into that new environment. And so I was a central sort of had a kind of front row seat to us transitioning a lot of that activity onto the internet, and the things we did went through the revolving door out into the civilian sector, where a lot of three-letter agencies in the intel community wanted our expertise, wanted our clearances. So I supported them for a few years building information warfare centers, so that community was super interesting. I always say it's kind of more interesting on the outside than it was on the inside. A lot of
Right, right.
bureaucracy, a lot of
Sure, sure.
approvals. Anyway, long story short, what brings me to kind of marketing and where I'm at today is, as we often do, trying to transition to the commercial world of things. We had to figure out how to translate our skills. So I wandered in almost unintentionally into financial services. One of the early internet-only banks,
Hmm.
was one of the first 7 employees there, a bunch of technologists who had no idea what it was to build a bank, and broke all the rules, which is probably why we were successful. And started as an internet security guy.
Okay.
Again, kind of the common thread through all this is I love sort of looking for patterns and building out systems to leverage those patterns. So after a brief stint in internet security, I wandered into marketing, which seemed like a perfect fit, and have gone all the way from Google being a brand new thing. When we did the internet only bank, we didn't have Google. That actually happened in the middle of that sort of foray, to now we're walking into another, I think, similar transformational period with AI, right? Everything is changing for marketing and just in general business. So anyway, crazy journey along the
Sure.
way, built some businesses, almost failed miserably a couple times. So yeah, it's been quite the journey.
I can't help. Let's talk about those failures. I think that's where the best lessons in life come from, and where we can actually not only educate ourselves but others too. And so maybe let's sort of talk about when you say failure. How bad are we talking? How bad did you mess up?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, the first one, and I don't talk about it a lot because it was really kind of, you know, life resetting, was the failure in pilot training. We were in a moment where we just finished the first Gulf War. We didn't think we were ever going to fight another war. Pilot training, they didn't need a bunch of pilots. So they got really onerous on the washout rate, and every little
Okay.
thing was just grounds to
Yep.
wash us out. And I hadn't thought about anything other than that. And walked out. I remember my wing commander, which was the last interview. He said, well, actually, my squadron commander said, "Hey, you were like one of our better pilots." He's like, "Don't think that you like couldn't be a pilot." He's like, "You were one of our
How can you not? How can you not?
yeah,
Really, right?
exactly."
I
And
mean,
then the wing
easy to say, but how can you not feel that
yeah,
way?
exactly. And so that was reassuring. But then the wing commander, which is the last interview, he said, "Hey, you know what you need to do now is you need to find something that you're the best at." And so that started sort of playing in my mind where I wanted to kind of be at the top of the stack instead of just like one of the contributors after
Right.
that leadership sort of kicked in. But it took a moment, because that was, like I said, that's the only thing I had thought about for the first, 20 some years of my life. So that was the first one. And then the other kind of really sizable moment was after I had, did the internet only bank, led the sale of that to private equity, big win, went into Quicken Loans because they were kind of they didn't win the deal. Went in there, built some pretty successful stuff inside of there. And then I decided, hey, this corporate thing is not for me. I like to be scrappy and fast. So I started my entrepreneurial journey, went into building a software company, um, and then again, financial services, people that are in the mortgage industry, remember 2007, 2008, had a pretty successful software company. And then all of a sudden the floor dropped out on, we call it the financial crisis, but in the mortgage
Right.
industry, we called it the mortgage meltdown. All my clients went out of business overnight. We, had to lay everybody off. We went down to nothing. So I'm a person of faith. It got so bad. I literally, at one moment, I was in the office all by myself. There's nobody left. I just kind of went down to the knees and said, "Hey, like, God, this one's you." And so, believe it or not, a couple weeks after that, I got a contract for 20,000 a month, which is crazy, a consulting contract, and just pulled us out. And from
Wow.
there, yeah, it's been a great life since there. We rebuilt, built a couple different agencies, got a much more solid understanding of how to build sustainable organizations, and have been through a lot of markets. We're still in the mortgage industry, we're still in financial services, but yeah. So those are the kind of the
Mhm.
two really
Okay.
kind of large dips that we drug ourselves out of.
So for me, the natural question is what was the lesson that you walked away with after those experiences?
Yeah. So one is just to, and I'm a big fan of this. I think it's Ryan Holiday. It's Amore Fate, right? Which is embrace fate. So it's just this concept of one, um, embrace and be realistic about your current circumstance. I think too often we'll bury our heads, we'll look for people to blame or situations to blame, and we'll get really distracted by putting sort of the accountability for our situation in other places. So one, just embrace, hey, this is the current circumstance. And then the second thing is I always like to, and I think I learned this in the military. We did a lot of planning, but kind of all planning, as they say, kind of goes out the window at first contact. And so really analyzing what is happening in front of you and
Mhm.
literally moving one step at a time forward with the information you have, which is usually imperfect, and just kind of moving forward. So embrace the situation, be realistic about it, and then from there, just take what you've given. I'm a big fan, even with clients. The first thing I want to know is like, what are our raw materials that we have to work with? So what do we have to work with? What are our pluses, our minuses? And again, not to sort of overestimate our resources and just scrap from there.
Early on, you reference curiosity as sort of potentially being a part of your journey or your story, and I'd love to. I think it's I mean, there's a bunch of topics I can talk ad nauseum about. Curiosity is one of them, because of all the wonderful things that it presents. I mean, curiosity is this thing that it allows you to move from like thinking of something and actually taking action on it, right? And whether it works in your favor or not, that's a whole other piece of it. But it's just taking that initial action, taking that first step again, being audacious enough to take that first step. So curiosity very much works hand in hand. And I'd love to get your sort of take on that curiosity one, and then how it's helped you throughout your careers. I'll say, I guess, since
Yeah,
you had a
yeah.
few.
Yeah, for sure. So I think, curiosity is critical, especially for leaders, and also just in business development. If you're going to be an entrepreneur, I don't see how you can do that without being curious. And what that means to me is I never understand the concept of somebody being bored, right? My mind's always turning. I'm always curious. I'm always looking and observing things. I'm always curious about what other people do, and I like to go just a little bit deeper on a lot of different things. So what that does for me is one, it means that I'm constantly consuming information and understanding and thinking about like where could this go. So this bit of technology, this AI, this, resurgence of nuclear energy. Like I'm always thinking about like these little morsels, like where could this take us long term, which tends to advantage me and to some degree disadvantage. Because the other thing about curious people is sometimes it's a little bit of a disadvantage if you haven't kind of learned what it does, because it could put you so far ahead of the curve that your market's not there yet. And that happened with me with software a little bit. But again, kind of puts you in position to be ready for the next thing. I think that's a key moment.
Mhm.
And then the other thing, as we're building relationships and networking, the more curious you are, the more opportunities you have to have some part of an affinity with the people that you're working with and talking to, right?
Mhm.
If you're curious, there's a chance, you've been to that state, you've done that thing, you've played with that hobby. And so it really increases the potential for an affinity with, business development, sales,
Sure.
all those kind of relationships.
Absolutely, I can see that. That's a really great point. Actually, one I've not thought of before. So thank you for sharing that. For myself, I look at and I actually heard someone once say it, and I thought about it. I'm like, yeah, you're right. It's when you remain in a curious state,
Mm,
you suspend judgment. You never have the answers because you don't know. You're too busy asking the authentic, real questions like how does this work? What does it do? And what happens next? And who does this? And who goes where? Like you're constantly asking that. So you're not pretending like you have the answers, even if you think you might know what the answer is. And so I think, and what that does, that just opens up the doors for existing understandings, but allowing them to be even more broad, if that makes sense.
yeah,
Right?
yeah, no, for sure. That's a key point, and it's kind of like maybe a little bit of a side quest. But the judgment thing, I think, is really critical. I say all the time, it's really hard to hate somebody if you know somebody in that community, in that in that area, whatever it is. And so I think that's really interesting to have a lot of friends in a lot of different communities and walks of life. And I love to travel. I love to understand. So I think that's really important too, because it does suspend judgment, because you probably know someone, in that community or in that circumstance or from that perspective. Doesn't mean we always necessarily agree and align or even approve, of all those actions, but it does suspend the judgment so that you can at least have some understanding of the perspective.
Yeah, and when you talk about understanding perspective, that's those are key to building relationships, right? So going back to that
Yep.
point that you made, I mean, if someone feels that you truly understand them
Yep.
and know that, and I'll even take this to, and even in the context of leadership, right? Like, imagine the impact you as a leader can have on those that are following you if they truly feel that you understand them. Empathy is a great word, and that you're communicating in a manner that shows, hey, like I don't know this. What do you know? And you're respecting them. So I think those are all fantastic points. So I guess I inadvertently jumped into the leadership conversation, but while we're here, I know you referenced in the past unconventional leadership practices or leadership approaches, if you will. I wonder if you could expand a little bit about what those look like and from a practical standpoint that you've seen or used even.
Yeah. So one of the things, kind of again reflecting back on my military career that I always thought was interesting, and I probably wouldn't have had this opportunity if I had flown and got my ultimate dream. But one of the things that I always thought was interesting in the military, and it took me a moment to sort of transition and understand when I went on to the civilian world, as leaders, as officers, we were expected to lead the team that we were given. And we were expected to hit a certain level of performance or execute a mission. And so we were expected to execute. And so that created a lot of different skills. We didn't have the opportunity to hire people, to filter them out, to quickly turn them. They always say, what is it? Hire slow and fire fast. Like we didn't get that opportunity, unless
Take what you
they
got.
did.
Go.
Yeah, I mean, other than maybe disciplinary actions and stuff like that, you were stuck, right?
Right.
You had to
Right.
bring their skill to a certain level. So what I learned in that moment is, everybody generally has some set of skill sets, or you can work through and around their particular, again, perspective, their approach, and really trying to put people in the right places on the team, compensate where you need to, make everybody feel a sense of purpose. So that's a big one. So I've always been really reticent to just sort of, um, you know, one, hire a lot of people. My teams are generally small.
Mhm.
They've generally been with me for years. And so, yeah, that's a little bit unconventional, I think, in this world where we just generally just hire up a bunch of people or try to bring in the A team players and pay them a lot of money. And so, generally, a lot of my teams are built a little bit more organically. We build them up, we learn together, we pull together so we can contribute as a kind of a single organism
Right.
versus a bunch of individuals. So that's probably the biggest one is just lead the team that you're given.
It sounds like, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds like there's a bit more hands-on approach from your perspective as a leader.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I try to um, understand and spend, and this is kind of one of those things that really changed through COVID. Through COVID, like a lot of agency owners, we got rid of the office. We went remote. We got enamored with Slack and video meetings and that sort of thing. We realized we could hire from all over the country. But then, you know, fast forward here, 5 or 6 years later, and we realized like we don't have that connective tissue anymore. It's hard to build personal relationships, even though a lot of us have been working together for years. So one of the things that more recently, I guess there's 2 points to that. More recently that I've noticed is one, as AI's come on the scene, what I've been trying to do as AI has released some activities and made me more productive, I'm trying to protect that margin and reapply it to having personal contact, getting on meetings and having again, not necessarily with the purpose of accountability
Mhm.
or check-ins or anything like that, but just having more personal time and meetings. And then the second component of this, and where I started to realize again a handful of years later, where this becomes more and more important is on another podcast we were talking about. A friend, Sean Patton, had brought up these I think he called it moments of observation. But
Okay.
one of the things that I started to realize is that there is this gap in middle management and leadership that's just missing from a whole generation, because generally before, what we ended up doing was our leaders and managers that are coming up through the system observed us leading and managing. Well, there's no points of observation anymore. And so right now I'm struggling to kind of think about how do we get these managers and leaders in a position, because they have never observed it, right? They might observe it and it really doesn't work, right? Observe it through Slack, but they don't see
Right.
me leading. They're not sitting in my home office. They don't see me leading. They don't see me
Mhm.
managing. So how do we fix that? And I'm not sure I have a good answer for that. But I think it's going to be a critical moment here in the next 5 to 10 years, because we've got a couple of generations of people that have never seen leadership in person.
That's exactly, and that's a big part of that, because so much of what we learned is by example. So for so if so one of the reasons why I love the topic of leadership is because the ability of impact that leaders can have, right? It's
Yeah.
massive. And if you were to line up, 10 individuals and say, hey, tell me who your favorite leader is, all hands would shoot up, and everyone would have that one person, and it wouldn't take long. There's not a whole long to ponder and figure it out. If you take a step further and say, what about that person that you like? You're going to hear things again. This is just me from my perspective, but you're
Yep.
going to hear things like, "Oh, they listened, they encouraged, they supported, they motivated, they include all these powerful, powerful words that aren't necessarily always connected with leadership per se. When you think of I'm a leader, you're not necessarily thinking listening to
Yep.
people, right, or showing attention or care or empathy. But those are very much part of the leadership framework. And so, in this new age of working, I think, and I don't know if this is fully the answer to what we're talking about here, but I do think a key component of that answer will be remembering the human element in everything that we do, like that humanity piece. has to exist to be effective, whether we're talking over a screen or in person to person. Me
Yeah.
seeing you and recognizing you as a human being that maybe woke up this morning and didn't feel the best because you didn't have a great drive in, or maybe it was just the exact opposite. You felt great because you had a great workout and your endorphins are running high and you're ready to attack the day. But it's being able to recognize those things, I think, is going to be key. And if that's the answer, I'll bottle it and start selling it. But if not, then we'll keep looking. But I think that's going to be at least a part of it.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, one of the things that we're trying to, or at least I am in some of my organizations, try to take out is, and there's still, a place for it, but a lot of times our meetings turn into like the meetings on Zoom and stuff like this, which is kind of our new reality. They turn into just accountability, presenting, y- you know, status updates and those sorts of things. So, and I'm not a big fan of a ton of meetings, but one thing that has been really interesting is we started a practice of 1 hour a week with our account managers,
Hmm.
and uh, we're not allowed to do status. We're not allowed to do check-ins. The only purpose is for me to work with them to understand problems, challenges, things that we can clear out, situations that they've run into, to create a little more crosstalk with the account managers.
Sure.
Also, training. If somebody, this is how you can kind of pull from Slack into a personal meeting. If I see something on Slack where somebody's done something really interesting, or done it in an interesting way, just had this the other day. I was like, hey, Anthony, on the next call next week, I want you to show how you did that, because I thought that was an interesting way to do it and sort of bring them in to train each other. So that whole meeting is a lot more organic, has no agenda. Nobody should feel stressed coming into it. It's
Right.
really just kind of an open, just a conversational meeting where we can share and be safe, make mistakes, learn some things.
And it's not you doing all the talking, which is a big
Yeah,
right, which
absolutely.
is
I just
key
I just
because
opened and it's amazing too, like the first couple meetings that we had, there was a tendency for people to give status. They wanted to prove to me that they were doing something
yeah, yeah,
valuable. And I
yeah,
said, "No,
yeah,
no, no. Like tell
yeah.
me your problems. Tell me that client interaction that went bad. Tell me where you're stuck." And it took 2 or 3 weeks, but after that, it's kind of interesting how much that we just clear out in those meetings and get
Wow.
account
Yeah.
managers unstuck and clients, back in a good position, right? Because if we're stuck, clients are suffering, right?
Bill, that says so much about the culture because you're right. I've sat in those meetings where it's like I'm doing this, I'm doing this, I'm doing this, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, and there's nothing real. Those are just surface level stuff, as opposed to here's my challenge for the day. Here's what I did. I'm really proud of. Here's something new that I found that could help you. Those types of meetings, those types of gatherings in this digital space, they're so powerful. But the other ones, like you said, hey, I'm here, like kind of thing, and
Yeah.
I always, I chuckle. Some of these meetings where all the cameras are off, right? All the cameras are off. You look at the blank screen,
We're
and
still, yeah, we're still wrestling with that, but yeah. It's okay if your cat crawls up on you and I mean,
life.
it is what is, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, maybe the guy just wants to see him better. Is he still in bed taking a call or whatever? He doesn't want anyone to know. I don't know.
Exactly,
That's
exactly.
okay.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah, exactly. Feeling, and I think that's part of it. Like the expectation should be that you're doing the job that we hired you for,
Sure.
right? So let's talk about the other stuff, beyond that, and stretching and challenges and stuff like that. Again, I think it builds a sense of trust. It also builds a sense of accountability. If my expectation is that you're doing the job, and then what we talk about is, you know, beyond that and executing at a higher level, that creates, again, accountability, and I think it creates some trust and some, a safe environment where you can take
Agreed.
some risk, which is what we need all of our employees to do.
Agreed. Curious about so I want to go back to the transitions that you made from one to the next, if you
Yeah,
will.
yeah.
There's at least three of them by my count. I think there's more, but I think I counted three. And really curious the mindset or approach as you're moving from one to the next. I'd like to think that there's an element of fear or uncertainty and doubts as to whether, hey, is this the right move or am I making the move at the right time? Those sorts of questions. So curious. Well, first off, if you face those kind of things, and how did you get over them or get through them?
Yeah, I think so there's a kind of a term, I don't know if it's where I heard it or whatever. It's just kind of this sense of strategic courage, and I think it's useful. One thing again I learned, early on is we're usually making quick decisions with incomplete information, and that was always a tenet of military leadership. The fog of war, the incompleteness of things. Um, Going through the academy, we were exposed to so many different things,
Hmm.
that very quickly I got confident that I could learn a bunch of different things. I mean, I learned to fly at the academy. We did sailplanes and planes with no engines. They disconnect you, and you got to do the right thing. You're solo in there. The other interesting thing, I got my jump wings there. So we did 2 weeks of training. Your first jump, it's all you. You got to pull the cord. There's no tandem. There's no so we did a lot of things that gained me the confidence that I could figure out, giving in a limited amount of information pretty quickly, a lot of different things. And failures, weren't, you know, there were failures and there were risk, and you have to be accountable for that. So I think that was one thing that I learned really early on. So when I made those transitions, and this is hard. I've tried to even impart this on my kids, and they don't have the same. Even my kids don't have this. They had a different journey, I guess. But I tell them that like I never took a job that I was qualified for. It was always a job that I was curious and I thought would be interesting to do, and then I felt confident that I would be able to figure out sort of the baseline necessity of that. And I think a lot of younger folks are not confident with that. I mean, when I transitioned out of the military, and I was doing Intel, and I was going into the sort of the commercial sector. They had, I was in a consulting company that went back into sort of these federal intelligence agencies. But the first thing that I walked in, I'm waiting on my clearance. Another guy that I had actually worked with before, I go into this lab and he says, "Hey, I got my clearance, so I'm transitioning into this other thing. You need to take over this intrusion detection program that we're building. I'm writing it in Perl, and you got to take it to the finish line as I go do my thing." Well, I'd never programmed before in my life. So I went
You're
down to
like,
the
what's
Barnes and
Pearl?
Nobles. Yeah.
You're like, what's
I went down to
Pearl?
Barnes and Nobles. I bought two books. I've always been a fan of O'Reilly since this. I bought the Pearl cookbook and then the basics or something of Pearl. I went home that weekend. I went through those books. I went through those cookbook lessons and I coded them in there or whatever. And I took that to the finish line. And from there, I learned a little bit of software engineering or whatever. But like I wasn't intimidated for a moment. I was like, the knowledge is out there. And now we're in the world of AI. You can learn anything
Sure.
very quickly or have it augment you. So I guess that's probably the main premise. It's just at some point building enough confidence and curiosity that as you go through those transitions, instead of looking for what can I do, because a lot of times when you transition, and this is happening right now, got a son who's a software engineer, got laid off recently. And oftentimes when that transition happens, that opportunity or what you were doing, like I didn't have the opportunity to fly for the Air Force anymore. That was shut off. So I had to learn to do something different. So instead of looking for something that you're qualified for or looking for something that you can do with the skill set you have, instead looking forward and say, what would be interesting to do? What looks like an interesting job? And then jump with both feet in there and convince people, as you're going through those interviews that, hey, I'm going to fit, I know enough because I
Yes.
equipped myself to have this interview.
Yep.
But beyond that, I'm going to be the highest performing, the most curious, the most initiated person that you're going to have on this team, and that's won the day through all those transitions, really.
And I think that is such a wonderful approach or mindset in anything you're starting brand new, right? It's just exciting, right? And
Yeah, for
that's the
sure.
best that's the
Well,
best
I
sort of
mean,
environment to
you're
be in.
gonna be passionate. You're gonna be excited. You're gonna be learning. You're gonna
Totally.
yeah. I think it creates a whole different type of employee, teammate, everything. But if you just go into the thing you've done over and over again 100 different times,
Yep.
that's going to be a boring teammate. No one's going to want to work with you.
Right.
You're probably a little curmudgeon,
I
so
think so. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I'd love to know, Bill. Now perspective is a wonderful thing, right? Like you go through life and you get to the other side, or you get a little not other side. You get to a certain point, if you will, and you look back. You're like, ah. And sometimes you can connect the dots and see certain things. And I went here and I had to do this. I had to do that. If I didn't do that, I wouldn't go here. And you go through all the exercise. You're like, ah, it makes sense. Having a bit of perspective on your life, and I know there's lots for you to do still. When you look back, what would you tell your younger self, given what you know now and all that your experiences have been?
Honestly, as much risk, and kind of like jumping forward into things that I did, I probably would have pushed a little bit harder in those earlier days. So when you're young, unencumbered, you don't have as much responsibility and accountability. I would push for as many experiences as you can have.
Right.
And even during pilot training, I would have probably been a little bit more aggressive in those moments. And so I think being comfortable with risk. I remember distinctly as the first time I was going out or kind of getting in the door to jump for the first time. I had that moment of like, oh crap, I'm gonna like jump out of this airplane, and then I gotta do all these things they taught me on the ground. I never had the sensation of kind of the wind and everything like that. But in the moment before I like exited the door, I said, there's been thousands of cadets and military personnel before me that have done this. Like there's nothing to fear. And then we just kind of went through it. So always when we look back, even those lowest dips that I went through in those moments, they're never that bad. So in the moment, you feel like your whole world, like I said, down on my knees, asking, God to take over the reins. I was done. I had a family, I had responsibilities, I had bills and everything. But looking back, like that was a blip. Like it didn't
Yeah.
like so could you
It's
have been more aggressive? Could you have been more confident? I think that's the thing. It's never as bad as it is in the moment. And so yeah, go ahead and push a little harder.
That's it. That's good advice if someone's going through a relationship breakup, right? It's the same thing. It's not as might be bad now, but will and I bring it up facetiously, but there's certainly some truth to that as well too. That you what you're going through in that second, you're like, oh man, I can't believe. But then you're like, okay, and because life does continue, things do move on. Progression is part of what we are here to do, and so I'm hearing that loud and clear. Bill, this has been awesome. First and foremost, thank you for the insights. I think they're bang on and really insightful with respect to just being able to people understand this journey we're on, right? And things can happen and changes may be made, and we've got to transition, whether it's in a brand new career or a brand new life. Like I mean, and so it's in, and oftentimes it's our response to these changes. It truly is a difference maker. It's the difference
Totally.
maker because
Yeah.
change is always going to exist in our world, and
Yep.
how we respond to it, I would say, is the key. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. Pick yourself up, be passionate, charge forward. It's always going to be better. It's always going to be better. Looking back, yeah, it's not even a blip.
For listeners that wanted to connect with you, learn more about your work, where could we send them, Bill?
Yeah, the kind of two main places. Bill Rice Strategy, if you want to work with me in a business sense, gives you an idea of all the things that we do around strategy and leadership and building lead generation teams. And then my executive brief. We talked about curiosity. MyExecutiveBrief.com is a newsletter that I started because I always wanted to have a chief of staff that would bring me the kind of the newest and the latest. And so I built a little bit of a team that does that for me, and you can join in and look alongside of the things that I'm taking a look at by joining that newsletter and have your own little chief of staff bringing you kind of the newest, latest trends.
Very, very, very cool. I appreciate that. And what we'll make sure to do is put the contact details in the show notes so listeners can connect with you. Again, Bill, this has been awesome. I really enjoyed our time together today. Again, the insights are fabulous, and I always walk away with just always take something like, okay, yeah, and and for me it'll be like, yeah, there's been thousands of cadets and officers who jumped out of planes before, so what's one more jump, right? That's
Exactly. One more jump. It's all good. It's all good. Take a little risk, lean forward, take what God gives you in front and just charge ahead.
That's right. That's right. Well, thank you for this. This has been awesome. I appreciate the time. And again, thanks for being a guest on the Audacious Living Podcast. Welcome back. What a ride. You know, Bill's story embodies exactly what we talk about here on this podcast, the audacity to move forward even when the path is uncertain. You know, if I had to pull one major insight from our conversation, it'd have to be this, you know, our circumstances don't define our outcomes. Your response is what makes all the world of difference. Bill talked about embracing where you are even when the place is uncomfortable, and then taking one step at a time with the information you have, however imperfect it may be. You know, if I think what I personally loved about this conversation was Bill's transparency. He didn't hide the failures, pilot training setbacks, the 2008 collapse, the moments on his knees praying for direction. These are what we need to be open with, and Bill absolutely was. And in each one of those moments, he showed us something powerful. Even when life knocks the wind out of you, the trail doesn't end. You just keep moving forward. Listen, you can learn more about Bill and his work or connect with him directly. Of course, he's got his website and he's on LinkedIn as well, but we got you covered because, of course, all those contact details are in the show notes below, and I would encourage you to reach out to connect with Bill directly. Like I said, he's got a lot of great insights and a lot of good stuff to share. Now, as we close, remember the trail that we talked about earlier on, whether you're on a quiet Puerto Morelos road or on the beach or in the fast-moving streets of Mexico City, your journey is your own. The terrain will change, the pace will shift, but your tools, curiosity, courage, leadership, accountability, and the confidence to reinvent travel with you wherever you go. And I strongly encourage you to remember that. Thanks again for tuning in to another edition of the Audacious Living podcast from the beach of Puerto Morelos. If you've enjoyed this episode, do me a favor, like, follow, subscribe, or share, leave a review with someone. Every little bit helps us continue to grow and reach even more people who are ready to step into their boldest, most audacious selves. Until next time, stay loud, stay curious, stay bold, audacious, and we'll see you soon. Take care.
Driven by purpose, fueled by passion. My words got power, my thoughts have action. Motivation, stay gracious. That's greatness, be audacious.